Hello everyone and welcome back to another video where today I just want to do a quick video to talk about some quotes that have come out from Russell T Davies talking about his process behind bringing back Omega and changing him and making him different from the way he was originally, because I find these quotes kind of fascinating and I've seen them kind of go around Doctor Who Twitter and I basically just wanted to give my take on these. But before we do, I've got two elephants in the room to address. Number one, yeah, I flew a plane yesterday. It was kind of mad. There was this disabled accessible plane flight kind of company called Aerobility that took me up in a plane, and there was even like hand controls so I could fly the plane myself. It was really, really cool. There's nothing to do with Doctor Who in this segment. I was just really happy to do it, and it was my dad's gift to me as part of my birthday. So shout out to you, Dad, and shout out to that company. They were all wonderful and really helpful, and I had a great time. Second thing, a new head has hit the collection. This is actually one of the old sculptures. I remember seeing this in the Doctor Who experience and thinking one day when I'm an adult with money, I'm going to own that. And I finally do. I actually got it from a mate of mine who was selling it on eBay. It's one of the Cyberman Edge sculptures by Matt Buckley, and I've always wanted one. And look at how incredible it looks. It looks so good. So that's the two things I wanted to address just before we get into this. Feel free to subscribe if you're new. That would be greatly appreciated. We are trying to get to 30,000 subscribers and we are on 28,800. Any support would be greatly appreciated. But let's dive right in. It is also very hot in here, so I'm going to try and keep the lights on for as little time as possible. Doctor Who showrunner Russell T Davies on reinventing Omega in the reality war. The writer speaks to Doctor Who magazine about tweaking the legend to bring back the deadliest Time Lord of them all. Among the challenges the 15th Doctor faced in his final episode, The Reality War, was the return of yet another dangerous Time Lord, Omega, the first Time Lord last seen in 1983's Arc of Infinity. After spending some time trapped in the Underverse, Omega has ascended beyond his humanoid form into a great godlike creature surrounded in myth, which not even the Rani was fully prepared to face. Speaking to Doctor Who magazine showrunner and episode writer Russell T Davies discusses the legend of Omega and how he reworked the character using the show's pre-existing backstory. Russell T Davies on bringing back Omega. At one point I sat there thinking I'd invent a new Time Lord. I thought I could create a Time Lord nobody had ever heard of, who was banished, but then that just simply becomes shorthand for Omega. I love the fact that as fans discuss this show and that it must be new and must move forward, and within 10 words we mention the Rani. You have to accept that it's a 62-year-old show and this is part of its vocabulary. I used the Time War to tweak the legend of Omega. A lot of things about Omega were not said in the original series. You have to accept that 40 years have passed. The Time War came along and everyone's history got changed. So that's what Omega is now. You can reinvent it. Our way of walking through the world is constantly being reanalyzed, so I like to think it's the same on Gallifrey. That's happened over the eons. Omega was recontextualized, and the story gets bolder and changes over time. We don't want to repeat the past, we want to push it forward. Now, I have to say, there is an implicit irony to saying we don't want to repeat the past, we want to push it forward, all the while the cover of Doctor Who magazine with the giant picture of Billie Piper's face stares back at me. But that aside, I find this all quite baffling for a few reasons. So let's start at the top of the quote here. He basically says at one point that originally he was going to invent a new Time Lord who was banished, but that inevitably brings up Omega, who was also banished, albeit not to the Underverse, but to an antimatter universe. So that's a bit of a retcon there, a bit of a change, but sure, whatever. The next thing that he says kind of baffles me a little bit too, talking about, I love the fact that as fans discuss this show and that it must be new and must move forward, and then within 10 words we mention the Rani. You have to accept that it's a 60-year-old show and it's part of its vocabulary. And here's my issue with this statement. For one thing, I get that the show has a legacy, and that's one of the great things about Doctor Who is its lore and its history and everything that comes with that. It's one of the things I love about the show. I mean, look at it, of course I do. However, just because something is from the past of the show doesn't mean that the audience who are watching the show is going to be aware of that context. The Rani is not a part of regular vocabulary for casual Doctor Who viewers. Sure, we know who the Rani is, but the audience that you're selling this to do not know who the Rani is. So, just having the Rani in a script is not enough to get people to be invested. You have to add something there that makes it worth doing. And the same goes, especially with Omega. Because at least the Rani, you can at least go, wow, she's another Time Lord. It's easy to explain. Omega is the basically creator of time travel and one of the most important members of the foundations of Gallifrey. And you made him a big CGI blob man. And the other interesting thing, there's two things I find interesting about this. He says he used the Time War to tweak the legend of Omega, but that's not how it's explained in the script. The way it's explained in the script is that Omega wished to be a god, which if you watch the Three Doctors, he wished to be a god, and the Underverse, being in the Underverse all that time, allowed him to evolve into a form of godhood because that was what he wished for. Which sure is a little bit clunky and is probably a bit too similar to what Sutekh was, where he basically used the time vortex to evolve into godhood. But I can at least somewhat buy the idea that in this Underverse, in this realm of where, you know, gods become real and kind of fantasy becomes reality, I can buy the idea of Omega being trapped there and wishing to be a god all those years, manifesting in him becoming a literal god. I don't know why you would just say the Time War did it when that was never in the script. And, like, maybe it was in an earlier draft, but correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think the Time War was ever mentioned in reference to why Omega is like this now. And beyond that, it feels really kind of like, you know that one Simpsons meme of whenever you have questions like that, you just assume a wizard did it. It kind of just feels like the Time War has just kind of become that thing that you go, oh, if any of the lore doesn't make sense, just assume it happened off screen with the Time War, which, like, it's just a bit lame. I don't know, it's just a bit like, oh, okay, so he's just like that now because the Time War stuff happened off screen. I do like what he says about the idea of the way that we as a culture reevaluate, you know, our historical figures and how that's the same on Gallifrey. I think in his original quote he mentions how, you know, Winston Churchill is constantly being reanalyzed. Obviously some people see him as, you know, the defining hero of Britain. For other people, he also symbolises some of the things wrong with the Old Order and the British Empire and all that sort of stuff. And I do think that that's an interesting idea to tackle, the idea of the Time Lords coming to terms with these legends that they've built up, not really amounting to what they thought they did. But that doesn't come across on screen either. He's just a big monster. And I think this is what also kind of bothers me about the final quote as well. We don't want to repeat the past, we want to push it forward. The issue I have with this is, like, look, on paper, you can bring back Omega. You can bring back Omega, you can bring back Sutekh, you can bring back the Rani, you can bring back whoever. But what you've got to do is make it relevant to people who are watching now. One of the genius things about the way they brought the Daleks back in Series 1 is they made them the reason the Doctor's home planet was destroyed. That gives the audience a core reason to care about the Doctor's conflict with the Daleks beyond, oh my god, look, it's the Daleks. And he does this with every villain subsequently in RTD1. The Cybermen are part of a parallel universe that Rose eventually gets stuck in, and then obviously in Series 3 they introduce the Master, who is not actually hyped up as the Master, but he's hyped up as You Are Not Alone. He is hyped up as another Time Lord, which is a big deal in the context of Series 3, where the Doctor believes he is the last of his kind. Whereas, fast forward 20 years, and we look at the way Omega was built up, and we look at the way that he was introduced to modern audiences, and the way he was introduced is literally just them repeating his name as a hype moment. Which, yeah, it works on people like me. I like Omega. But to normal people who aren't familiar with that name, it doesn't mean anything. But then at the same time, you're bringing back a character called Omega, and you're only really relying on his name recognition to kind of build this hype moment. So the only people who are going to be hype are the people who know who Omega is and have seen the classic series. But then you also just don't do anything with, like, his classic Who interpretation. You don't sort of make him more of a mad titan who's gone insane, or you don't really add to the idea of him being betrayed by the Time Lords, which is one of the core things about his character. He got sent away there by the Time Lords after giving them the gift of time travel. From his perspective, he was done dirty by the Time Lords, and you could really explore that in a modern interpretation of the show, especially with the Doctor, obviously knowing about the Timeless Child stuff. He feels like he was done dirty by the Time Lords now as well. So would the Doctor maybe feel somewhat sympathetic of Omega's position? Would he believe that, oh, maybe Omega has a point, like the Time Lords are scummy? No, he's just big monster now. And it's just weird. It's like, I don't know who this is for. Like, you're bringing back a character called Omega, and the only way you're building him up is to say the name Omega repeatedly. So the only people who are going to be interested are the people who know who Omega is. But you're also not pleasing those people, because anything you could do to build on his classic Who interpretation just isn't there. So I find the use of kind of old stuff in this new era baffling for a multitude of reasons, because it's like, on the one hand, you're trying to market it as a new era, so bringing Omega in on its own is kind of just a questionable decision. But also, even if we look past that, you're not making it appealing to a new audience who don't know who Omega is, because you're not explaining to a new audience why they should care, but you're also not appealing to the people who you presumably are trying to appeal to by having Omega's name be mentioned, which is the classic Who fans, because you're not doing anything to really capitalize on anything that made Omega interesting in the classic series. So, who is this for? I don't understand. Russell, I like you, man, but what's going on, man? I actually am crashing out a little bit. I felt the exact same way about Sutekh, and I mean, this is the exact same treatment Sutekh got, right back down to the big name reveal, and him only really being important because he was in Pyramids of Mars. But I think just having him kind of say this outright just kind of made me think, like, why did you do this? Like, look, I get that you want to get classic Who fans excited. I get it. It makes sense. There's a big load of people now, and there's iPlayer and stuff, and Doctor Who is more accessible than ever. But if you're going to go that route, at least embrace what these characters are. Either embrace wholeheartedly their original, sort of versions and build upon those, or just do something new with them. I think what's so brilliant about characters like the Toymaker, which he himself brought back, is that, while yes, I will concede, Neil Patrick Harris's Toymaker is very different from the Michael Gough version of the Toymaker we see in the original Celestial Toymaker serial. The thing that they got right with the Toymaker in adapting him in 2023 is that he maintains that level of being a basically child with the godlike abilities to just play with everything and make the universe his toy, which is very much what the original Toymaker does as well. Obviously, the original Toymaker is a lot more sinister about it, and obviously the Neil Patrick Harris Toymaker is a lot more kind of jovial and kind of pantomimish about it. But that, to me, is just the essence of adaptation. Things change during adaptation, and I don't think anyone's really against changes in adaptations, provided that you actually either A, retain the core of the character and what the character represents, or B, it makes it interesting on its own right. And I do think that the Toymaker is made interesting in The Giggle in his own right. He's this kind of godlike character who sees the world as his plaything, who is kind of like one of these main gods who created the calling card of The Giggle, and, he came to this universe and just saw it as a playground. And I think that's a natural extension of what we see in the original Celestial Toymaker story, where we see him, having mastery over his domain and basically treating the Doctor and his companions like playthings. Having the Toymaker do that, but this time, on Earth, makes complete sense and is a normal evolution of the character, and is why I think the Toymaker was done fairly well. And that wasn't that long ago, you know what I mean? That was 2 years ago. Like, imagine if, right, instead of the Toymaker coming back and, obviously doing all that stuff, making everyone go crazy in The Giggle and, having him play with the Doctor in his domain, in the toy shop, instead we just get the name of the toy maker like dropped a couple of times in a cliffhanger to Wild Blue Yonder, and then he finally appears, and he's just like some sort of husk who like wants to like sort of, I don't know, kill the Doctor as like part of a quote-unquote game, but it's not really a game, he just wants to kill them because that's basically what Omega is in the Reality War, and it's basically kind of what Sutekh is in Empire of Death, and it's just weird. I don't understand. But anyway, I've rambled on this for long enough. I don't even know what I'm going to title this video, but I wanted to talk about this because it just sort of baffles me. But let me know in the comments below what you guys think. If you did enjoy this video, be sure to give it a like, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you later.